When the Indiana Fever hired Stephanie White back in November 2024, the plan seemed simple enough. You had the best young player in basketball, a coach with deep Indiana roots who had just won Coach of the Year, and a roster that was finally ready to contend. The pieces were all there. The excitement in Indianapolis was real. Fast forward to today, and White's job security is the subject of heated debate across Fever Nation. The reason? Caitlin Clark played just 13 games in 2025 before a groin injury ended her season, and what followed was a string of losses that exposed every weakness in the roster. Some fans are already dreaming about Cheryl Miller taking over the sideline. The question now is whether one injury-plagued season is enough to cost a coach her job, or whether White deserves another chance with a healthy Clark in 2026. To understand the pressure Stephanie White faced this season, you need to know how she got this job in the first place.
And Coach, your team was up by 5 after the first quarter. Then the game flipped in the second quarter. What do you want your team to get back to doing here in the second half?
Well, first and foremost, we got to take better care of the ball. I think we had 6 turnovers in that second quarter and got a little frantic in that 11-0 run that ended that second quarter.
White is an Indiana native through and through. She played her college basketball at Purdue and had her first stint as the Fever's head coach from 2015 to 2016. After leaving Indiana, she went to Connecticut and turned that program around completely, earning the WNBA Coach of the Year award in 2023. When the Fever decided to move on from Christy Sides after the 2024 season, White was the obvious choice. The hiring itself was controversial from the start. Reports about White coming to Indiana surfaced on November 1st, 2024, before Christy Sides had even been officially fired. It was one of those situations where everyone knew what was happening before it actually happened, and it left a bad taste in people's mouths. Sides had just coached the team through Caitlin Clark's historic rookie season, bringing unprecedented attention to the WNBA.
Caitlin obviously kind of participated in team activities here for the first time. Just how is she progressing and how was this a good step?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good step because she got out there on the floor with us for the first time, part of the, sort of return to activity thing, but it was all very low maintenance, 5-on-0.
But apparently that was not enough. Most fans agreed that White was probably an upgrade. She had proven herself, understood Indiana basketball, and had the credibility that comes from winning Coach of the Year. But the way it all went down felt messy. Still, once White was hired, fans were willing to turn the page. The expectations were enormous. Clark had just completed a rookie season for the ages, one that changed the landscape of women's basketball. With a full offseason to prepare and a proven coach, this was supposed to be the year the Fever became legitimate championship contenders. The season started with genuine optimism. Clark looked healthy and ready to build on her rookie campaign. The roster had added some pieces around her. White's system seemed to be taking hold. Through the first 13 games, things were going according to plan. The Fever were competitive every night. Clark was putting up her usual numbers, dropping dimes and hitting shots from distances that should not be legal.
But I think that's even been something like me and Steph have always talk about when we go and watch film. And even that New York game where I played really, really well. I started the fourth quarter off with 3 turnovers in a row or 2 turnovers in a row. And Steph yanked me and she was like, this is a learning moment. Do we need that in this moment? No. Right. And then she subbed me back in. There was a play where I kind of got a steal.
The team was building chemistry and looking like a group that could genuinely compete with anyone. In July, they captured the Commissioner's Cup, beating some quality teams along the way. It was a nice trophy and a sign that this group could win when it mattered. The cup is not the championship, but it showed that White's message was getting through. For a few weeks there, everything looked golden. Then came the injury that changed everything. After 13 games, Caitlin Clark went down with a groin injury, and suddenly the Fever faced a reality they had never prepared for. How do you replace the most dynamic player in the league? How do you keep a team motivated when their star is on the sideline? These were questions Stephanie White had to answer on the fly, and the results were not pretty. White made the decision to shut Clark down for the rest of the season rather than rush her back and risk further damage. It was the medically sound choice, the responsible choice.
Yeah, you said on Wednesday that there were some things you liked, some things you didn't like about the Aerie, Caitlin, double point starting lineup. Just with working with that the past couple days, is that something you're planning to continue today?
No, we're going to go back to our original starting lineup today. That was also something specific to Golden State.
But it also meant the Fever would have to navigate the rest of the year without their franchise player. According to White, the situation was frustrating, which might have been the understatement of the year. Here she was, in her first season back with the team, coaching a roster built around a player she barely got to coach. What became clear very quickly was just how much the Fever relied on Clark for everything. She was not just their leading scorer or primary playmaker. She was their entire offensive system. Without her, the spacing fell apart. Possessions that used to end with open shots now ended with contested jumpers or turnovers. Players who looked comfortable suddenly seemed lost.
Steph, when watching Caitlin, when she has a little bit of a mini slump for her with three-pointers, are there things you see or even talk to her about it, or you just sort of know she's going to shoot her way out of that?
Well, I think she's going to find her way out of it. Now, we've got to get her easier ones.
White tried different lineups and rotations, but nothing quite worked. This was a team designed to play with Caitlin Clark, and without her, they were a completely different animal. The Fever finished the regular season with a record of 24 wins and 20 losses. On paper, that is not a disaster. Plenty of teams would love to finish above 500, and considering the circumstances, you could argue White did a decent job keeping the team afloat. But context matters. In Indiana, expectations had been set much higher. This was supposed to be the season where the Fever announced themselves as a force. A 24-20 record felt like a disappointment, even if it was understandable. They made the playoffs and advanced to the semifinals, where they faced the Las Vegas Aces. The series went 5 games before the Aces sent Indiana home for the summer. The Fever competed and had their chances, but ultimately came up short. Making the semifinals is not nothing, but for a fan base that had been promised championship contention, it felt like a letdown.
Are you trying to get me fined again?
I am not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of physicality that they're able to play with against her. You know, I knew it as an opponent, and I see it as her coach. And you know, I'm not exactly sure why, but it just is what it is.
Where things really turned ugly for Stephanie White was in August. The Fever lost 4 out of 5 games during a brutal stretch, and the social media backlash was swift and merciless. Fans who had been willing to give White the benefit of the doubt suddenly ran out of patience. One fan posted on Twitter, "I'm officially done with the Fever. Stephanie White is a horrible coach." Another wrote, "Stephanie White isn't the coach to lead this Fever to a championship." These were not isolated comments. They represented a growing sentiment that White did not have the answers. The complaints focused on specific aspects of her coaching. Fans questioned her rotation decisions, wondering why certain players got big minutes while others who seemed more productive sat on the bench. They criticized her late-game play calls, pointing to losses that seemed to slip away in the final minutes. There was particular frustration over how she handled Lexi Hull, a player many fans felt was being underutilized. Whether these criticisms were fair became almost beside the point. Once the narrative takes hold that a coach has lost the plot, it becomes very difficult to shake. What made the situation more complicated was that White had legitimate excuses. Losing Caitlin Clark for most of the season is not something you can just scheme your way around. Clark is the kind of talent that warps everything around her, the kind of player who makes everyone else better just by being on the court. Her gravity pulls defenders away from her teammates. Her mashing creates easy baskets. Her shooting stretches defenses to their breaking point. When she went down, the Fever lost their entire identity. White was left trying to patch together lineups without the league's most creative offensive player. That is a tough spot for any coach. Still, coaching at the highest level means dealing with adversity. Fair or not, White was judged on the results. The wins and losses are what go in the record books, not the explanations for why things went wrong. Fans do not want to hear about injuries or bad luck. In the harsh world of professional sports, excuses do not protect your job. As the offseason began, speculation about White's future started to spread through Fever Nation. Some fans started floating alternative names. The one that came up most frequently was Cheryl Miller, the legendary former USC star who had coached Caitlin Clark during the 2024 All-Star Game. That game had been a feel-good moment, with Miller clearly enjoying herself on the sideline and Clark responding to her coaching. Fans remembered the chemistry between them and started wondering what it might look like if Miller took over in Indiana. Miller's credentials are beyond impeccable. She won 3 Naismith Awards during her playing days at USC and led the Trojans to 2 NCAA championships in 1983 and 1984. She was one of the most dominant players in the history of women's college basketball. After her playing career, she moved into coaching and led the Phoenix Mercury from 1997 to 2000 during the WNBA's early years. She has spent the last 2 decades in broadcasting, where she has become one of the most respected voices in basketball. There is also the Indiana connection through her brother Reggie Miller, who is a Pacers icon and one of the most beloved athletes in Indianapolis history. The Miller name carries weight in Indiana. At 61 years old, Miller has not coached in the WNBA since 2000, but fans thought maybe the chance to coach a generational talent like Clark might bring her back to the sideline. It is important to be very clear about something here. There have been no actual reports of the Fever having any interest in Cheryl Miller. No credible journalists have suggested she is on their radar. This is purely fan speculation, the kind of wishful thinking that happens on social media when people are frustrated. Miller has a great broadcasting career, and there is no indication she has any desire to return to coaching. But the fact that her name even came up tells you something about the level of dissatisfaction with White among parts of the fan base. The reality is that Stephanie White probably deserves another season. She inherited enormous expectations, lost her best player after 13 games, and still managed to guide the team to a winning record and a playoff appearance. Caitlin Clark is expected to be fully healthy for the 2026 season, which means White will finally get the chance to coach the team she was hired to coach. It would be harsh to fire her before she has that opportunity. But in professional sports, fair does not always matter. Results matter. Fan sentiment matters. If the Fever struggle early in 2026, or if the fan base remains hostile, White could find herself on the hot seat again. The pressure of coaching Caitlin Clark is unlike anything else in women's basketball right now. The spotlight is intense, the expectations are sky high, and every decision gets scrutinized. Stephanie White signed up for that challenge, and now she has to prove she can handle it. So here's my question for RENEDW. Do you think Stephanie White deserves another season with a healthy Caitlin Clark, or should the Fever move in a different direction? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more WNBA coverage.